and welcome back to Chatting with Chaz. I'm so glad you're here. Today is going to be another fantastic episode, one that is near and dear to me because it's about social media. And you know, I'm all over social media. In fact, I don't know if you're following us. Follow us at Chatting with Chaz on Instagram and Linen and Flax Co., our lifestyle brand created here in Roswell, Georgia. Now, as we dive into this is a social media crisis. I've invited a special guest. You met her last week, Dr. Allison Hill, my therapist, but also my friend. And welcome back, Allison.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be back.
You came back with, by popular demand. Everyone loved our last episode, episode 14. If you didn't watch it, I highly recommend that you do. It was about narcissism, but then it took a turn into relationships, healthy, toxic, all of it.
We covered a lot of things.
I feel like we did cover a lot of bases, and it really hit home to a lot of our viewers and subscribers. It was one of our most popular podcasts. Well done.
I'm thrilled to hear that. Yeah, and so we can see some of the benefits of social media.
Yes.
Right? Because
yes.
I think that allowed people to connect and feel supported and feel heard in ways. But like we talked about last time, anything when taken to an extreme, even habits that can be for good, can become really toxic and harmful. And I think you had a lot of curiosity around that. And I'm really glad that we're going to talk about it today.
I'm ready to dive in. I feel like it's a topic that everyone knows we have looked at as a crisis, but maybe it wasn't backed up. Maybe as parents, we've thought this is a lot for our kids. This is a lot to digest every day. The social media, just everything they're seeing and enticed with. And I've always thought this is a problem, but I really now believe it's a crisis. And then you've backed that up and what we're hearing in the news and in mental health. Tell us a little bit about what you've heard.
Well,
and what you know.
And I think for the first time, as you know, I have my notes here today. The Surgeon General has even issued an advisory report in 2023 about the harmful effects of social media.
Wow.
So I think for the first time, even our government is recognizing it as a significant public health challenge that requires kind of the whole nation's immediate attention and awareness. And hopefully at the end today, we'll get into kind of some resources and what you can do as a person or a parent struggling with this. But I think we have to acknowledge we are kind of drinking from a fire hose here. I mean, what has become more accessible to us over the past decade and a half kind of has outpaced what any of us were aware of or could have anticipated. And especially for our kids whose brains are not fully developed, what we're starting to see is a very, very strong correlation into some real negative impacts on their mental health.
I mean, 54%, the notes. I mean, I know you brought a lot of notes. We kind of did a deep dive as well. 64% of American young adults, 18 to 29, have experienced cyberbullying. Yes. I think I saw a statistic that was 40% of middle schoolers are cyberbullied.
Yes. I mean, quite frankly, if you talk to an emergency room physician, the increase of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, our children and youth presenting to the emergency room with suicidal thoughts has increased 50% in the last 10 years. In the last 3 years alone, teens presenting to the emergency room with body dysmorphia and eating disorders has increased 36%.
Unbelievable.
So if you think about that, we really are facing, we are so regulated in so many domains of our life. If there was a toy that was produced that was causing 36% of kids to present with, it would be recalled. Mm-hmm. If there was a drug that got put out that was causing a 50% increase in suicide rates, it would immediately be banned by the FDA. And for some reason, this is a real area that has gone unregulated and unchecked. And now we are seeing the studies are very, very clear that there's been an increase in mental health issues. There's been an increase in cyberbullying. There's been an increase in our kids' exposure to some really dangerous content.
Yes.
Pornography, sexual content, things that are kind of embedding messages into their brains, which again, I want to say are not fully developed. That kind of make them think that this way of living and engaging is okay. And what we know about social media is it is not based in reality.
Right. And yet we're all trying to live up to a false reality.
Yes.
Children especially who can't even filter for themselves because, like you said, their brain's not fully developed. So they're comparison. It's like a comparison trap. Yes. So young girls, especially, I mean, I've seen it. They're looking at their bodies, and so posted here. I see it when you go on vacation, but this person's on this trip and they're on that trip.
Yes.
And it can lead to a complete false sense of reality, but also it turns to yourself and you start looking at yourself critically. I can't compare, yet that person,
looks great.
It's just such a mess.
It can be such a mess,
and
very overwhelming
for young children.
And I think it's, the problem is twofold, right? I think that there's unlimited accessibility.
Right.
You can get on and be connected with people of all different ages all over the world very quickly. And then I think the other piece is what we are starting to understand is it really is a business. I mean, these platforms have trained their algorithms to kind of cultivate this conditioning. A lot of people think it's addictive, but it's really more of a conditioning where the dopamine response and the reinforces how many likes do I get? How do I look? There was one study that I researched that now 6 out of 10 posts are selfies because selfies tend to generate more likes. So again, we're cultivating this idea that a picture of myself or interacting with myself is maybe more, preferable and getting more reinforced than a picture of my family or a picture of the scenery.
Right.
Things
or
like that.
actual content, something that is meaningful and helpful. Yes. Well, we've noticed that as well. And as you build a brand, of course, you get on all the platforms. I never really understood the effects of social media until I started a brand. And the effects were great for building a brand. You had access to a community that you would not have known. So I think there's a false sense for young girls who maybe just start influencing or get involved in, different platforms. They're like, oh, but I'm starting a business. I'm becoming an influencer. And it seems like a great opportunity, but then everything that comes with that. So there's good effects as we see. Of course, for me, I saw it grow a business, but I've also seen the harsh effects of it.
Yes.
And it just seems like there has to be some type of thoughtfulness going into social media. There should be some type of condition, correct? Like there just should be, like you said, the FDA would put something up that would warn people.
Yes.
And I feel like it's a tool that's been given that becomes a weapon.
It absolutely can be. I think the other thing, which, and I'm guilty of this myself, I think as parents, I think we still think about kind of our children's physical safety or the danger of the real world safety. And we don't even realize how dangerous what they're being exposed to within our own homes. Within
in their
our
bedrooms.
In their bedrooms. That's a hard rule for me. With any family I work with, there does not need to be a phone or a tablet in anyone's bedroom.
I think that's a good rule. Do you feel like there's an age for that where they can, like in high school, they can? I feel like it would be even helpful to not have it in your bedroom in high school, but it doesn't, it's hard.
So you raise a great point.
Yes.
One of the things I struggle with as a parent and professional all the time is, that balance, kind of like we talked about last time, and how we find that balance. And if we think about how we raise adolescents, and they grow into things. They grow into driving. They grow into staying home alone. They grow into being able to go to the neighbors and check in when they get there. We haven't had them grow in at all to social media.
To access to strangers.
Exactly. So maybe do you start with the 30 minutes of tablet time in a shared family space? Right? While I'm cooking dinner, if the homework is done, you get your 30 minutes of tablet time, but I'm going to make sure I know exactly what you're on and I can hear it.
Right.
And then maybe, do we do a little more privacy for you when you get to a developmentally appropriate age?
Right.
Which a lot of these platforms, let me be clear, by their own warnings, say that they are not appropriate for kids under the age of 13. Snapchat, Twitter, they all do put that out there. But again, do parents even know that the platforms themselves are saying, I
don't think they do. And I think some parents, I think some parents feel fine with it. Like it keeps them busy.
It also, it can be a way for safety. If you feel like you're struggling with safety of the outside world, sometimes a phone moderates that for you, right?
Right.
We have Life 360, or I can call them and make sure they got to the neighbor's house or are getting picked up from lacrosse practice. So again, we've kind of also created this false sense of security around the phones, thinking that maybe they are doing good.
Right.
Whereas I heard one researcher say, and I loved this quote, if you let your teenage daughter go to her room at night with her smartphone, it would be like if you left your front door wide open, left your daughter's bedroom wide open, and said to perpetrators around the world, my daughter's room is upstairs to the left.
I think that's a great point.
And if you wouldn't do that, if you were locking your doors at night, then we need to be thinking the same way about who is accessing our kids on social media.
1,000%. I think that is a great picture for parents to think of and consider. We always had a rule they had to be 13 before they got their phones, but honestly, I wish we were more extreme. And I wish that I had made decisions to say, you know what, we'll talk about it. There's not an age, but each kid develops differently. Each kid is going to use their phone differently. I wish I had been more careful. Even let's talk about gaming. You think, well, you're just gaming. It's innocent. So here's your headset. This is your Christmas present, your Xbox. Well-intended. I think there's a lot of well-intended parents. I've been in this position where I gave my kid an Xbox and a headset, but then they're meeting strangers online. They're opening their bedroom door or their playroom door or the bonus room door, or even in the family room. You're busy, you're on a call, you're cooking, and your child can be gaming with a complete stranger. And then I've read articles, that's where predators, they live in those rooms.
Absolutely.
Predators.
I mean,
in your home.
It is really scary to think about who can access your kids.
Yes.
And who has unbridled access to your kids through these devices.
Right.
And so again, like anything, though, like any risky behavior, right? Our kids are going to encounter it.
Correct.
So how do we teach them to learn to live within it? Because it's not going away. And like we said, there are some really good benefits, right, to social media.
There are.
People can get support. People can contact. You can FaceTime with loved ones who maybe you haven't seen in a while. There are some benefits, but how do we teach them to use it? And how do we have these conversations? How do we put out there, hey, gaming is great, and we're glad you're into it, and we're glad you get to play with your cousin who's halfway across the country. I need you to let me know if anyone tries to contact you that we don't know.
Yes.
Right? Let's have a dialogue around it. Let's have a social media family policy, right? How do we start to have a dialogue, just like you might with, impulsive sexual behavior or drugs and alcohol? It's not that our kids aren't going to be confronted with that kind of stimulus or that desire to do something that seems dangerous. They're adolescents.
Right.
That's where their brain is taking them.
Right.
So again, how do we start to have these conversations? And I'm as guilty as the next parent. I didn't realize how important it was to have them around cell phone usage or these social media platforms.
I think it's interesting what you bring up about, there's an age for alcohol, 21 years old, and then driving, you need a license. But this can be deadly. We're seeing teen suicide go up. And yet there is no conversation, and that's why this is a great use of a platform to have a conversation, to have a warning, to say, hey, let's think about this. This is a tool in their hand that can be very dangerous. You see, like you mentioned, the girls with eating disorders. I mean, that's a young girl, 13 years old, that can lead to death. I've had personal friends where their daughters had to be checked into facilities. What was her measure? It was social media. It was seeing TikTok girls and comparing herself against that. So how do we get to the mindset of looking at it as such a danger where we should have these in-home conversations? Because what's going to happen when we've had those conversations? Well, Johnny's parents let him. You guys are so extreme, and is it because of our faith? And we've had these conversations. We used to have children come into our home, and I'd say, dock your phone on my kitchen island. They had to be in a basket.
Yep.
You're here to have FaceTime. But they were like, that's so embarrassing. Nobody does that. I just think you have to kind of go against the flow in a lot of these ways. What do you recommend that we do as parents?
I think that's one of the hardest things about social media is that, it's going to take kind of a community transition because we are constantly confronting, so-and-so gets it at his house, or
constant.
Little Johnny is allowed to play Roadblocks for 3 hours a day. So I think first educating parents, but then I think communities coming together. Whose houses are they going to? What is that family's social media policy? And these are hard things to dive into with other parents.
Right.
Like we said last time, we never want to judge other parents' parenting. Parenting is hard.
Right.
But I mean, this is a real, I would ask my, son's other parents of a house he's going over to, do you have unlocked guns? Do you have cigarettes out? Right? I mean, there are certain things that we all either assess in our own mind or directly assess with the houses we're letting our kids go to. And I think social media has to become one of those additional things. It should be considered as risky a behavior as if, they were going over to little Johnny's house and the pack of cigarettes was out. That is what the Surgeon General is telling us. I mean, it is becoming a crisis that requires everyone's immediate attention. And so who are your parent groups that you can have these conversations with? What is the school's involvement? Does the school have a social media policy that parents can either opt into or opt out of? A lot of the Surgeon General's published guidelines. There are various resources that have, guidelines for social media policies. And what I love about guidelines is they're aspirational.
Yes.
They're not rules.
It's just a
They're
good
not
guide.
laws.
Yes, aspirational.
And again, we all make mistakes, but have other parents considered the guidelines? If your school has a social media policy or guidelines, great. Have those other parents read them? Is there kind of a forum by which you can sign up as a household? We are trying our best to follow these guidelines in our house.
Right.
Because I do think, the stats are, like you said, 50% increase in teen suicide. Rates of depression and anxiety has increased by 70% in the last 25 years. Number of children turning up in the emergency departments with a psychiatric condition has doubled since 2009. Again, we mentioned the eating disorders. The other thing we know is kind of the age at which kids are getting access is a significant contributor. Our brains grow and develop. And right now, the stats are showing that 53% of kids have a smartphone by age 11.
Wow.
Yet the University of Pennsylvania in 2018 found a strong correlation between less social media use and better mental health. And for every year earlier a kid got a phone, there was a positive correlation with negative mental health outcomes.
Wow. That's telling.
If you think about that, we are seeing it is correlated. Again, we cannot say causal, but there is a strong correlation to the access to those devices and the way our kids are presenting. So I do think we just want to raise awareness and start to have those conversations in a real way and not shield it. I think we also, when there's pressure to keep up, and make sure our kid doesn't feel left out.
Right.
And then I also think we all kind of suffer from this disorder that I like to call, like, not my kid. Wouldn't happen to my kid. My kid wouldn't be the bully. My kid wouldn't be bullied. But I think what we have to realize is this is saying 1 in 2, sometimes 2 out of 3. So this is in our backyard. This is in our communities.
It is. It's in your house.
Yes.
The thing you mentioned briefly is pornography. And I think having boys, I would like to ask a question about boys versus girls, how you see a difference, if there is a difference in either targeted cyberbullying or the effects of social media, number one. But with boys, I'm a mom of 3, but I have 2 boys. Pornography has always been something that I have been concerned about because they're boys.
Yes.
And they have access. So they have, at school, they're given a laptop. They have iPads in our home. There was a desktop. So I was always very careful. We talked about it a lot. But you're not seeing them every moment. So I think I think of social media in this conversation is, cyberbullying or, the trap of comparison. But I also think pornography has skyrocketed. So that's with young kids and adult men. It's taken off. It's a huge industry. I think smartphones are part of the problem because you're on your phone, you kiss your wife goodbye, you're hitting a site. Or you get off on the bus going to school and you're hitting the site, and it's addictive and it's destructive. Talk a little bit about the access of that for young boys, how dangerous that can be. We didn't really plan on talking about that, but That's where I go as a mom with a boy.
That accessibility piece is, you hit the nail on the head, Chaz, quite frankly. I was not an adolescent boy, so I have a limitation there. But what I understand is 20 years ago, curiosity around sexuality is a normal thing.
Right.
And 20 years ago, if you were an adolescent boy, to get access to porn required a detailed plan. Right?
Yes, you had to
Maybe
go
one of
buy
your
it. You had to get
buddies
some
had
money.
stolen their dad's Playboy, or
Yes.
I had a brother. I'm also raising boys. I'm married to a man. Maybe someone had a bootlegged VHS tape that had a tape of something from Cinemax, right? But you would gather and you would have this kind of material that you'd acquired somehow,
right?
And it was hard to get. It was hard to access. It was very limited, and usually was something that had been, Playboy was published, Cinemax was aired, so there was some level of filtering that was done. As we've said now, our kids have unfiltered access to the global internet. And it is very easy for them to access it. In 2019, another statistic, porn sites got more traffic than Amazon, Twitter, and Netflix combined.
Wow.
Combined.
That is unbelievable.
Yes.
That's a problem.
And
you see marriages. I mean, you're the therapist. Mm-hmm. How often do you hear about porn?
Yes. And
addiction.
We know psychologically when young people watch porn, it changes the way they view relationships and people. And if you think about it, it also, for men, changes the way they view women, quite frankly. I mean, most pornography has a woman in a submissive position, or there might be violence involved, there might be demeaning language. But again, what they are watching and being exposed to, potentially at a time when their brain can't distinguish, this is fictional, or these are actors, these are people getting paid a lot of money to kind of wrap us into this. It really can...
They can't break that down in their head. They think this is real. This is how you do it.
This is how you do it. And we also know just generally what kids see, they feel neurologically compelled to do. That's why we, try to model manners or emotional regulation. So again, especially if young kids are seeing things like that, and we know that they can stumble upon it very quickly and very easily.
So easily.
I know.
Yes.
It can be
there's
really
such
scary.
access in our homes. I think that's something I want to highlight. Your home you create, you want it to be a safe space.
Yep.
That's you have the conversations about be careful with coaches, always, be careful, but it's the predator that's on your phone.
Yes.
And it's an industry that's on your phone that is so accessible and so convenient.
Yes.
And this is just a movie, but I know that it's true. We were watching a movie and it was just, there was comments made on social media and a high school kid was killed, but it went back to, they were emphasizing a point that it was comments on social media. And then I did a deep dive on suicide in social media, and it's unbelievable how many kids have killed themselves based on a comment. It's not just the movies that we watch. It is real. It is happening.
Yes.
It is happening in Vermont. It is happening in Georgia and these sweet communities.
Yep.
Because kids are under attack. And, it breeds from mental health, because I think it's a kid that's insecure, that's struggling, that's in a dark place, watching dark content, and then watching a movie like that and saying, I'm going to do that. And it's just unbelievable, the access. Even let's take it a step further, the content they're watching and streaming in their bedrooms. I never was one to give a kid a television in their room. I have changed that. I regret it. But I was like, no one's having a TV in their room. And then my last kid, the third,
always,
was just like,
always the third.
The third always gets you. And then I'm like, I regret that decision. So he stays up too late, lack of sleep. I mean, all these things. TV's in the room.
Yep.
Netflix on their screen. I mean,
Yes.
It's just so dangerous. Is that over? Am I overreacting?
No, I mean, I think it's another great point. I mean, we're talking about, the exposure and what they have access to and the impact of that on our kids, but also just the cost of their time, right? It disrupts their sleep. It is taking away from time that they can spend with other people in real connection. It might be taking away from physical activity. It might be taking away from homework. I mean, some studies found that some kids were on the internet, social media, up to 7 hours a day.
Unbelievable.
It's like a work shift.
It is like a work shift. In fact, your phone has a setting that'll tell you how much time you spend on your phone.
Yes.
And I do glance at it, and I've cut way back because I was like, that just doesn't even seem healthy, even though I'm running a business through it.
Yes.
That is an important thing to watch. And I'll tell my kids every now and then, we'll be sitting at dinner and I'm like, hey, let me see your screen time this week. I just want to see where you're at. And they're adult children, but still, I'm curious.
And in terms of who's responsible, again, it's not, I think as parents, we are trying to ride this wave and stay as up to date as we can.
Yes.
I mean, again, I think the inundation of how quickly and how fast and how ripe our kids are to kind of access it, which we know is the intention of the platforms now, right? That's become very clear. But I think that, do these platforms and these outlets also have a responsibility, right? When you go into TikTok, should it start a timer? And should it shut you off after an hour?
That would be actually fantastic. I've gotten lost on TikTok.
Yeah, you've maxed
looking
out
at
your
recipes.
TikTok time for today, and so come back tomorrow, or, Snapchat is done for you today, because we know humans aren't great at self-regulating at any age. It's really bad in adolescence, but that's normative. That's developmentally appropriate. That's where they are. But I think some adults are having trouble self-regulating.
Yes, I do want to talk about adults, but it's kind of regulating, I believe, for children, to kind of wrap up children. I think some of the takeaways you said and mentioned is to have the conversation at home before we kind of move into adults with your kids about screen time, about the right age for them to have it. And it could be different in every household. Yep. I think 13 is a good place, but I think 16 is better.
13, 8th grade. I mean, what I keep hearing thrown around are 13 socially, like the social media platforms themselves try to kind of give that warning. They're kind of, there's a movement around like no phones till 8th grade. But again, I always tell parents behaviorally when we're talking about whether it's gaming, TV in the room, you don't want to be the first parent handing your kid the smartphone, but it's really hard to be the last parent handing your kid the smartphone. I said this to one of my friends the other day, and she said, that's right. That's why I always try to be second to last.
I like that. Yes. Hold it out as long as possible. I will tell you, my older children have said that they appreciated that we did that. Mm-hmm. And it was a constant battle. And all their friends thought we were just next level, but they have said, like, I get it now.
Yes.
Because and I will say this, we have had plenty of conversations, this is interesting, where they have all said together, so corporately and individually, that they wish social media did not exist. As much as they're on it, they're like, I wish it didn't exist. It just messes with my mind. I don't want to compare. I want to be present on my vacation and not worry where Sally is on vacation. And wow, that's so much better. It creates a sense of FOMO. I hear often the language in my home. Like, I don't want to go to this, but I know everybody's going to be posting about it. There's going to be FOMO regret.
Yes.
And so I think the conversation is constant, has been constant in our household. Maybe less as they are now adulting, but I think they would all say that they had fun when they were in the neighborhood, even our old neighborhood, when everybody was just outside playing. And then when phones came, it was kind of in their generation, their time, everything changed.
Yes.
And they felt it because it was their time. Like, we would talk about these days of nostalgia that we didn't have phones. We were on our bikes. We were in our yards. They did experience that at a young age. And then when they all got their phones around 13, 14 years old, the whole neighborhood changed. Mm-hmm. Everybody was in their house. And life just changed.
It did. And kids used to have to be so much more creative. And if we think one of the things that the social media platforms are saying is that it gives a sense of community, it's supposed to foster inclusivity. But I would actually say maybe it's doing the opposite.
Yes.
Right?
It
because
isolates
to your
you.
point, it is very isolating. You don't have to remember how to, have social development skills, how to engage with people. You're receiving kind of these rapid signals with no ability to read someone's social cues, no ability to respond accordingly. If everything can be kind of distilled into pixels that are not based in reality, our kids are really kind of losing that connectivity and that creativity about how to spend their time. I mean, I think one of the things we don't hear a lot from our kids these days is I'm bored. And again, it's okay for our kids to be bored. Mm-hmm. If we transition to adults, some adults have trouble being bored. But it's okay for all of us to be bored. It kind of rewires our nervous system and gives ourselves a break. But there's a real fear of not getting that constant stimulation, in terms of kind of, well, what next? And
true.
what we know is these platforms, I mean, Facebook has even come out and said the algorithm is designed to take as much of our time as possible. I mean, their goal is to harvest as much of human time as possible, to keep us on the platform for as long as possible. Think about that. I mean, they publicly stated that, which is a real problem, because when they're robbing us of that time, what cost is it coming to?
I think that's the question. What is the cost? And that's for every family to determine, because it will isolate even in the home. Your kids are in their bedrooms more with their phone. They're not sitting in the family room watching a movie. Even if you're saying, let's have a movie night, their phone's close by. And so, yes, I think that's a takeaway, is to really kind of connect with your kids, have the conversation, even though it might be uncomfortable. And even though they might not like it, it's what's the cost? And the cost could be that they don't think you're cool, or they don't think you're fun, or you're not, awesome.
And they might feel left out.
That's fine. And they might feel left out.
And that is hard. But the one thing we know is kids can do hard things. They
can.
We can build resiliency in our kids, in different ways. And again, let them feel heard. And do we reach a hybrid or a compromise so that they don't feel as left out? But that idea of feeling left out should not drive the adult's decision making.
Correct.
Right.
That's a good takeaway.
We can hear it, and we can even lean into it, but we're not going to kind of respond based on that. Because again, I just go back to again and again, they have undeveloped prefrontal cortexes. Their amygdala is responding constantly. And we don't want to get into a power struggle with the amygdala.
No, I don't think that we would win.
We want to engage the executive functioning.
Yes.
Totally.
Well said, doctor. I love it. Let's talk about the effect it's having on adults. I mean, you see the effect in marriages. I've heard a statistic like 1 in 2 marriages end because of social media, whether someone meets someone or someone's just addicted, and their effort of communication is on social media and not on the spouse. So I've heard messages about that. I've heard about cyberbullying with adults, 40%, mostly women being bullied, which is just unbelievable. And it's mostly women bullying women.
Wow.
Sad.
Well, and I think especially for people who are willing to put themselves out there in different ways, and do have a presence on social media, then for kind of people who don't even know you to be expressing opinions about you, it's just, I don't know. It's really hard for me to digest.
It seems like a mental health issue. Yeah, it does seem like a mental health issue. I mean, we've talked about this. I have been cyberbullied, I believe is what you would say. Yes, women are twice likely as to men to be cyberbullied. And so when I first came across that, I was shocked because it was nameless people. They wouldn't share their name, and then they, and I kind of was looking at it, and I found myself getting upset and hurt. And I'm like, these people don't know me. None of this is true. And then I started thinking about the person, and I started thinking, what is wrong with this person? And I started thinking, this seems like a mental health issue on the people that would spend hours and days. And then I stopped looking at it because it did affect me. And I'm 50. So I'm thinking, what if a young girl
and you're a badass.
is getting this? And I'm a badass. But it affected me. I was reading about Julia Roberts.
I think it's great to say that.
Yes.
I mean, I think probably to people out there, you seem like you have it all. And that's your persona on social media. And that's what feels probably threatening to other people.
But I don't. But yes, and I'm I share that often. Yeah. But I think that is what it is. I think it is, and on social media, not just me, from what my take is that it's when you're happy and maybe you're thriving, and, people struggle with that if they're not happy. So I think that's a mental health thing.
Well, it also is, when you dive into kind of how these platforms are wired and the people who've kind of created them, we know everyone desires to be seen and heard and interact. But what I think we didn't realize is how manipulative the platforms are. Social media is actually designed to provoke feelings of kind of confrontation, resentment, hatred, aggression. You get rewarded on social media based on the algorithms for being more controversial. And if you say something that's kind of neutral, it doesn't get as much traction.
That's interesting. Isn't that interesting?
And so they have really almost teed us up to be like the ugliest versions of ourselves. And think about what's going on in Twitter right now, even about the political things.
I have that.
Yes.
And that is very
what's going on.
divisive.
And the fact that these countries are making comments on Twitter about launching missiles against each other.
Twitter.
It just is unbelievable to me. But it uses, the tools, the algorithms they have use relative positioning. And they play off the fact that we all respond when we're feeling envious or threatened.
That's interesting.
And so again, they are breeding this idea of the most controversial, again, Twitter was limited to 140 characters. Now it's gone up to 160. But if you look at kind of all the messaging, negative and aggressive and confrontational messages are shorter. Positive ones tend to be longer.
Interesting.
And they are kind of cultivating this.
I see that to be true.
Make it short and, Barbie.
And make it nasty.
Yes. Yeah. Because that kind of generates, and again, it's all about this relative positioning and all about, cyberbullying is really insidious. And I don't even think, certainly I don't think most parents know. People who are out there with their own social media profiles probably do, but, who likes or unlikes you is a real thing to follow. If you get blocked, it's a real, so again, kind of this insidious way of making people feel left out or not part of the group or disliked. It's kind of all built in. Who invented likes?
It's almost like, the kid in real life that sits at goes to the lunch table and isn't invited to the lunch table.
Yes.
So a like or someone unfollows you at that age, it's the lunch table moment.
Yes.
And that is destructive, right?
Yes.
Everyone talks about that as like the moment of, approaching the table and just wanting to be accepted. And then you have a child that multiple people are not following them. But I just can't imagine growing up at this age with this amount of accessibility, exposure, and even if they're not a kid who's not into social media, if they're not into it, it still looks like they don't have anyone that's engaging with them. So it's like,
well, and I've learned through my
horrible message.
Adolescent clients, you don't even realize the subtle messages that you can be in a group photo and someone might not tag you. And that is, sending a message to everyone in the know. But as a parent, I might say, oh, my kid's a part of that. They're doing okay.
Right.
We don't even realize that almost the language that has been cultivated on these platforms and the way it can breed this. You weren't invited. You were not included.
Right.
You are other than. You are on the outside.
I have heard of that with friends. I know like adult women that they had like a get together and someone wasn't invited, saw it on social media, and they're no longer friends. And I'm like, that's wild. Somebody was talking about that conversation. I thought that's what we're going to talk about. It's so sad. It's so, it's a problem. It's just such a mental health problem that even the person who wasn't invited is like felt so disrespected or discarded.
Yes,
because
left
it's
out.
a real thing. It's feeling left out. And then it's the kid at the lunch table, which I always had the heart for. I was the girl that wanted to be friends with everybody.
Yes.
And I am like that on social media, and I want that on social media. But then you also, being that girl, you come under attack. And I will say, as a 50-year-old person, I am going to go back to it because I think it's important, because we talk a lot about kids, but I can personally say it makes you, when I was watching and when I first was aware of it, I changed what I was doing because I was like, oh, they think I'm ugly. They think I'm fat. There's so much conversation about, am I 25 or 26, right?
Yep.
It's like, really? We're women.
Well, and
Really?
I'm so glad you said this, because I think for adults too, what we have to understand is it is so toxic that it's kind of cultivating this world that is abandoned of reality. It's almost a delusional world.
It is delusional. That's a great way.
Whether or not I'm included or not. And the problem is when someone is confronted with someone with a delusional disorder or some psychotic thinking where people have abandoned a sense of reality, we have reality tests to kind of ground them. I might have been left out, but then I called my good friend Chaz, and she told me I'm a good person and a good mom, and she's never going to have a girls' night without me.
Right.
And we kind of get those doses of reality that might pull us out of heading towards depression or heading towards anxiety.
Right.
If I'm in this kind of altered sense of reality state. Once you go down that kind of social media rabbit hole, you don't get that dose of reality.
No.
It just is more and more impaired reality.
It's like a vortex of non-reality.
Yes. And more delusional thinking, which leads to anxiety, depression. There's kind of nothing that grounds you back, thinking, no, these people might have said all this stuff to me, but I have these other people that are challenging that for me.
You know, you mentioned the depression and anxiety. I've also read here 1 in 4 people that have been cyberbullied reported they have trouble sleeping. So they're not sleeping. I mean, it affects your whole person.
Yes.
And, you know, what do you say? Is it a mental condition on the attackers? Like, what is it? Is it, like you said, I think it stems from insecurity or not feeling good about where they are. You mentioned it before. Like, how do we address that? Because if we address the problem, the problem starts with the person that's attacking.
Yes.
Then, and I feel like the root of it is the attackers. How do you fix that?
And
What
it's
is
been
that?
around for years, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
always been bullies.
There's always been bullies.
There's always been that guy that stole
What
your
is that
lunchbox.
condition of the heart? What is it? I just don't understand
Well, so if we
it.
look at the normative population, there's a certain amount of pathology present.
Yes.
And it tends to show up in our bullies. You know, I think the cyberbullying to me takes it to another level, right? Because again, it is so accessible and it can be nonstop and has led to some really serious mental health outcomes, including suicide for kids and adults. If people get, you know, kind of that down that rabbit hole, lose sense of reality. So cyberbullying itself is associated with a lot of short and long-term outcomes for everyone. But the bigger thing to me is even if your child or you are not the target of direct cyberbullying, everyone is seeing it. I mean, it is so pervasive that we are watching people say really horrible things to other people. And so even if we're not directly targeted, we're all being exposed to it all the time.
All the time.
Which I think is a really, you know, uncomfortable thing for us to reconcile with.
And I don't see the exposure changing, unfortunately. So what are tools that we can have, since I think it was 40% of women are targeted and cyberbullied. You know, what does that woman do? What are some good things, healthy things for her if we can't quench the attacks, right?
So again, we need that healthy dose of reality.
The healthy dose of reality.
If you think about cyberbullies, they have unlimited access to you, and their bullying takes place in front of the entire world.
Right.
You know, they're not just, you know, waiting for you behind
It's true.
where you pick up your bike and try to get home from school without encountering them. I mean, they are wanting the world to see you. And again, what we think is that, you know, it's kind of this drive towards almost emotional violence, right? You know, can I torture you?
It feels like emotional violence.
Yes,
Because
I mean,
it does just make you... It's upsetting. I read, I think I was telling you this, Julia Roberts, this beautiful, amazing, award-winning actress who's 50, and she posted a picture with her niece, and she had no makeup on, and she looked beautiful. I mean, I would love to look like that with no makeup on. And then what happened was very interesting, is people started attacking how she looked, not about the beautiful moment of having, you know, a beautiful afternoon with her niece. It was that she looked like a man, and she's looked so old, and look at her wrinkles, and look at her forehead, and then the people, this is interesting, in the comments that were saying, oh my gosh, it's Julia Roberts. She's beautiful. She's stunning. She's a legend. Then they were attacked, and they started calling those people fat. Well, you're ugly. That's why you're... It was this wild thing. So Julia Roberts, I guess, wrote about it, that she just could not believe. And she acknowledged, this amazing actress, that it was hurtful. But then she could not believe what she was reading in the comments about the other people that were just being kind. Like kindness.
People are
unbelievable,
dying to be significant.
Yes.
Right? And
Okay.
there are some people that putting others down helps them feel like they have agency or power.
Right.
In a world where, I mean, the reality is we're all grappling with our insignificance.
Right.
All the time.
Yes.
Right? It's one of,
I agree.
the biggest existential crises any of us can face, right? We come into this world alone, we go out of it alone. Right? It's really hard to reconcile.
Right.
And so some people, pathological people, I will even say, as opposed to kind of grappling with that, I would like more power and agency, it makes them really angry.
Pathological people, are we talking about, you mentioned that as far as narcissists?
Narcissists, people who have antisocial personality disorder.
There has to be a disorder.
Some of the cyberbullying, some of the stories, people are saying online to other people, you should kill yourself. Can you imagine?
That actually happened very close to home. I can't go into whom, but
just think
I
about
can't
the
imagine
person
it.
that can sit hidden from the world and say that to another person.
Yes.
Where have we come?
Where have we come?
That feels okay.
Right.
To say that to another person.
A human being.
Yes.
That's what I think about at the end of the day. Take me out of it, my feelings or whatever. It's a human being. And they're human beings. And, I remember when I was looking at it, there was remarks like if someone said something kind about me, it was like, you don't belong here because we hate her or something. I can't remember. It was something ridiculous, but it's like, that's a problem.
Yes, they are not seeing the
hatred is a
human.
problem.
Yes.
And then so let's move on from that. In closing, politics. We're in an election year. And I know I removed myself from Facebook. I rarely post because the last election was so hostile. Yes. And I would never want anyone to even know who I voted for. Rule number one. But, it would make me heated, like seeing how people were talking, and I wanted to defend people, and I wanted to, and I'm like, I got to get out of this crazy. It's absolute insane. These are neighbors talking to neighbors. These are friends on the football team. These are, people I'm close with, and they were just attacking people I went to church with. Yes. And, people being judged for their party. And it was unbelievable. And I still am not on Facebook. And the only reason I'm on Instagram is really my business. But the whole political thing, like, what do we do going into an election year? Would you say just get off?
Well, I think,
what I would
yes.
do.
Again, if it is generating kind of that moral outrage or hostility within you, or even if you, again, talk about people who can't see the humanity in other people. I'm confused why certain people think that their political opinion needs to be shared with the world.
True.
We all get one vote, right?
Just go vote.
And unless you are, your job is to comment on it, why are you? And again, that is that kind of, we touched on it even last time. This has bred this idea of narcissism.
Yes.
Right? And
this is the way.
Yes. And it's bred this idea of narcissism in a really hostile, outrageous way. It's become almost like a amplifier for the worst parts of our humanity. And I think we really have to check ourselves at that and against that. And I think, it's, I would go back to that adage that we teach our kids, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all.
Right.
And
I always say that over and over, and it seems so basic. But I think for everyone listening, if you can't say something nice, just don't say it at all. It's a simple principle.
Yes.
And it's been for as long as I've been alive. That's what everybody says.
The world could use more kindness.
Yes.
You're never going to get, slapped down for being too kind.
I agree.
And so I think we're at a real junction point politically,
yes,
in terms of everything we're seeing in the world and what social media has done to kind of stoke those fires.
I have really been judged for not speaking about who my political preference is. And I've always said I keep it in neutral here because it's not about my party. It's not about controversial topics that are going to give me likes, and I think if you have a platform, you really have to decide, what do you want your platform to look like?
Well, and again, do you put things out there that are going to make people feel more with you or against you?
Right.
That are more divisive in nature, an in-group and out-group? Or do we go back to the things that we can all agree to? Right? Being a good person, being a good friend, trying to do good in the world.
Yes, be do-gooders.
Things like that. But again,
yes.
Politics to me is all about the in-group, out-group. It is all about the conflict. It is all about disagreement.
Yeah, you're not swaying anyone by posting your affiliation or this is what I get everybody's passion. It's a very passionate election.
That's why everyone gets a vote. People can work the polls. You can go out and hold your signs.
Use that passion for good.
This is America.
This is America.
And that's a great thing.
Political views are the top perceived reason for online harassment among adult cyberbullying targets. Interesting.
Yes.
So
that says it all then, right?
I mean, it does. So Allison, in closing, some of our takeaways, how do you know that it's a problem? Whether, let's say it's twofold. It's a problem. You spend way too much time on social media. You're listening to this conversation and you're like, wow, I do have a lot of screen time. Oh, I should consider my kids. We should have that conversation. Or how do you identify a problem of, this is too much for me and this is not a safe space for me, and making that decision. I've seen influencers say, I just need to take a month off, and I've seen YouTubers say we're checking out for a whole season because of the mental
toll it takes.
That's a great way to put it. How do we know there's a problem?
Well, I think we're the best self-regulators, and again, I would first step away from that altered sense of reality, that toxic environment. So if when I'm alone or on a run or not in social media, do I continue to feel this way? Am I noticing I'm more anxious or more depressed? And how do I kind of weave back in that reality? Do I need a hard reset? Maybe. Do I need a social media detox? Maybe. But again, you're your best regulator. Or do I need to walk with my best friend?
Yes, a real person.
Yes, and to refocus on that connection. Do I need a present moment with my spouse or my kid or my coworkers? I mean, we have to be our best self-governors. And I think that's what we're realizing about social media is we have lost the ability to self-regulate because of the warped perception of reality. So whatever it takes for you to step out of it and check back in with yourself, I think is important, and that's what you're going to model for your kids. And that's where you're going to come up with personal guidelines, family guidelines. Do you come up with guidelines for when we have buddies over? I mean, whatever it is, we just have to start somewhere, and it's not going to be perfect.
Right.
And it's not going to be easy. I mean, the pendulum has swung one way, and now with awareness, we're trying to kind of get it back to neutral. I mean, it'll still swing, but can it be more neutral? And so again, just acknowledge that it's going to be hard and it's going to be imperfect. But I think if we all start to pay more attention, it'll go a long way.
Pay more attention to it.
Yes.
In closing, I got a message from, we have DMs and social media. You're new to social media.
I know.
She's working on it.
Thanks to you.
But because you're so healthy, I don't know, maybe it's not a good thing. Allison, no. But you're connecting with a lot of people right now, which is awesome.
Which
and a lot
has been
of
amazing.
People that watched last week are booking time with you, which I love, and you're in for a treat. But I will say one thing I did want to touch base, the DM I got, and there was actually a few, but one really hit home. She's a follower that's been around for years, and I know a lot of her story. And she shared how, smartphones, our phones have destroyed our marriage. And she says we're always on our phones when we're at home and we're laying in bed. And we're like addicted to our phones. So yes, our children can become addicted very easily. But in marriage, protecting the marriage, when you see there's a problem, what can that couple do? Can you have the conversation with your partner? Like, this is us time, phones down. Have you heard that in counseling? Because I know I've read it's a thing.
That for sure. It definitely is a thing. That structured time, again, that present intentional time. The other thing I would just go back to is if you are feeling alone in your relationship, which happens at times.
Right.
And someone starts messaging you kind of all those things you want to hear.
Yes.
Which appeals to all of us. I mean, I loved coming on this podcast, and it's been great to hear that I've made an impact on other people. I mean, we all respond positively to that. Just pay attention, because the reality is, that person might be messaging 10 ladies or 10 men, right? Because they're getting high off of those responses as well.
Yes.
And so I just would really caution people, what you get back through that screen is, again, potentially that warped sense of reality. And if what it really is you are looking for someone to say to you, you are gorgeous, or I wish I was in bed with you, or I want to curl up with you, well, then we need to figure out what that need is and how to meet it real time and in reality.
Yes.
Either with your partner or somewhere else. Because whoever is saying that back to you in those moments, might not be kind of the person you're really looking for, and might not be better than the person laying in bed next to you.
Right next to you. Put the phone down and turn your head and have a conversation.
Yeah. And just check in.
Check in.
Yes.
And I will say, that was a problem in our marriage. I was on my phone a lot. He was on his phone a lot. It's because we didn't have dialogue.
Yeah.
So I just worked and, I'm not sure what's happening on his phone, but it is a warning sign. So pay attention.
Yes.
Listen, pay attention. I think that's the big takeaway.
And talk about it.
Whether it's with your children, with your partner,
at
with
the
yourself.
girls' night.
At
What are
the
other
girls'
moms
night.
doing?
Yes.
Where is everyone on this?
Yes. And be kind. I know there's Facebook pages, there's lots of communities, and even like Yelp. Let's talk. Yeah, I could just sit here all day, but be kind. If you're going to put a review, be truthful about it.
Yes.
I have a friend who has a restaurant, and she just was getting all these terrible. It's like ruining her business. And I'm
do
like,
not look at my
they're
online
not
reviews.
even true. And so you could just have people that are just not healthy saying things. Just be kind, be wise, and have the conversations. And are there any resources you would recommend?
Yes, there are. I'm so glad you asked that. I think the Surgeon General's advisory report, is great. They have guidelines at the end for parents, guidelines for schools. So there's a ton of resources in that. And then one of the best organizations I've encountered is the Organization for Social Media Safety.
I love that.
There's a lot of great stuff on there.
So check that out,
yes.
Parents. Have the conversation and lead by example. Put your phone down. Try to. Yes. And listen, none of us are perfect. My kids will see me in the car doing selfies. They've watched me grow a brand on Instagram. But we do balance it with a healthy conversation, talking about boundaries, talking about how much time are you spending. Have those conversations. They will thank you as they get older, and you won't be the bad guy forever. But yes, I hope that this was a good, healthy conversation. I really, truly believe social media is a great tool that can be used, but it's in the hands that it's used.
Absolutely.
You can bring good to it. I think conversations like this are awesome. I think conversations on Instagram, trying to encourage people to, like what we do, love their home, love their space, love themselves. But then there's others that you would know that would be very destructive. Don't spend time there. Go where you're filled, where your cup is filled, and not where your cup is emptied.
I love that.
Right?
Yes.
Go get filled and find your people and your community, the right people. Thanks for joining in. Dr. Allison Hill, thank you for joining us again.
Yes.
I'm thinking of all the mental health topics. I love this conversation about mental health because I see how destructive it can be. And I have kids and I've had the brutal marriage. And so I'm thinking of all the topics we can talk about. If there's a topic you would like to talk about, put it in the comments. Follow us again on YouTube. If you're a video person, we definitely do videos here. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, all the channels. And make sure you're following us at www.chattingwithchaz.com. And of course, Linen and Flax, this beautiful lifestyle brand. And follow Allison, my friend Allison, who's now on Instagram, Dr. Allison Hill. Is it just Dr. Allison Hill?
Dr. Allison Hill. We'll work on the content.
Yes, give her a follow on Instagram. And she's taking new clients, so that's always good.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here again, Allison. And we'll talk next week at Chatting with Chaz. I'll talk to you then.